Recording. Welcome to our Unit 8 live session, everybody. Good to see y'all. We got a lot in store today. It's one of my favorite classes. We'll be diving into more of a deep dive on arguments from authority, in particular thinking about how we trust news sources and how we can trust particular scientific sources. So that's our big topic for the day. Let's do what we always do at our start of class. I'm going to do a little switch over to our Blackboard course page. I'll just take a look at what we got going on here. First, taking a look at the course content page, and then scrolling on down to unit. You know what? Let me take a quick peek into Unit 7 for a second. That was last week's unit, all about causal arguments and arguments from authority. I just want to point out, I did grade your discussion posts and I graded your participation activity already for anybody who handed it in, that is. And for anyone who handed in that participation activity, you can see right now in this old folder, last week's folder, there's an answer sheet to that participation activity. This is what it looks like. You see how it's all filled in and stuff. It helps you give the answers that you might be thinking of. So I recommend taking a look at that for anybody who did the participation activity, comparing your answers to the answers on here to get a sense of how it is you understand each one of these arguments that you tried to evaluate. And it might be a not so bad idea to start off class by taking a look at one or two of these particular arguments on the sheet, which we'll do in a moment. The first thing I want to do, however, is take a look at, certainly didn't mean to do whatever I was doing there. There you go. Go back to course content. Let's do a quick jump into Unit 8, just to check out all the stuff we have for class this week. So in Unit 8, here are the slides we're using in class today. We're going to finish up the slides we were doing last week on arguments from authority. And then we got slides on the news and slides on science. Looking forward to those. You have 4 readings for class this week, but they're not particularly long. The first one, How to Spot Fake News, that's 4 pages, not so long. The next one, Avoid Being Fooled, even shorter. That's a 2-pager, and it's one of those sort of lists, so not even that much to it. The next one, Settled Science, the shortest yet. This one is barely 2 pages. It's 1 page and a little bit of a second page. So all told right now, you don't have too much reading. The last bit is the coolest article. Rather than putting this as a PDF, I really like this article just as it exists on the website 538.com. Because it gets you the opportunity at the top to play with some stuff. You can start clicking little things here and there to see whether you can get a publishable result or not a publishable result. So that's the way of trying to think through this. And then there's the rest of the article beyond that, but that thing at the top that asks you to just like play with stuff is a really interesting way to think about how science works. So those are the readings you got to do. They're very nice. I think they're great. I highly recommend them. There's some optional readings as well right here. You can check those out. And you've got for class this week, one and only one assignment. That's a homework assignment. Unlike a participation activity, I am going to be grading this one a little bit based off of how well you do on this homework assignment. But it looks a lot like a participation activity. If I click on it right now, you can see. Instead of being about causal arguments or about inductive arguments or arguments from authority or deductive arguments, this homework assignment is all about arguments from authority. And it asks you to evaluate these arguments the way we've been learning how to evaluate these arguments in class so far. Check the competence of the source, whether the source is likely to know whether the claim they're putting forward is true or not. Check the sincerity of the source, in particular, whether there's a possible motive to lie or not, a possible bias that might distort that source's judgment or not. And then try to explain why it is you think the source is competent or incompetent, why you think the source is sincere or insincere, why you think the source is biased or unbiased, and ultimately render your judgment, whether it's trusty or shady. Trusty meaning the source is trustworthy, shady meaning the source is not trustworthy. And the example in this particular case is one we did last week. If your sister tells you that she didn't crack your cell phone screen, that is not a trustworthy source on that claim. You might very well have cracked your cell phone screen because she might be insincere in this instance. While she's likely to know whether she did it or didn't do it, she's an insincere source because she has this motive to lie. If she doesn't want to get in trouble, she doesn't want you to yell at her, she might lie to you. That's what I want you to do for all of these. I believe there are a total of 9 arguments on here to take a look at. And it's due your usual deadline, Wednesday. As I mentioned, I will be partly grading it based off of how well you do on this homework assignment, but still a large part of this grade is based on you doing it. If you do it and clearly put forth effort, sincerely trying to perform well on this, the worst you could get on this assignment is an A-. 36 points out of 40 will still be an A-. So anybody who at least fully completes the homework assignment is guaranteed at least 36 points out of 40. And then the rest of your performance will just be within that range of 36 points, 37 points, 38 points, 39 points, or 40 points. So I really, really value you trying this, doing it. So please do it. The other thing that's on here, as it says here, is ungraded. So don't worry about this. We'll be doing this during our live session today. This is something you don't have to hand in. It's not graded. So don't worry about this other thing at the bottom here. The only thing that's graded for this week is this homework. No discussion post, no participation activity, no test or anything like that. I'm trying to think of other assignments we've had. Just this one homework assignment. So I think those are the big logistics we've got for class today. Any questions, thoughts, or concerns about anything related to class at this particular point? Feel free to write no in the chat if you don't have any questions. Feel free to write, yeah, I got questions, and write your question in the chat. Or feel free to hit that raise hand button, and I'll call on you, and you can unmute yourself and listen to what you have to say. So I got a message, not to everybody, but just to me, where a student was wondering if I accepted late assignments, like participation activities. I do accept late assignments, particularly participation activities. And some of the more recent discussion posts where I only ask you to post once, not post 3 times, I do accept those late discussions. Any of those first 5 weeks of the semester discussion posts, I won't be accepting those late anymore. But any participation activity you can still submit for some points. Any of the more recent discussion board posts where I only ask you to post 1 time, you can submit for some credit. Other questions, thoughts, or concerns? Feel free to write no in the chat if you don't have any questions. Feel free to write, yeah, I got questions if you do have questions, or hit that raise hand button. I got 1 no from Barbara. Everybody else is remaining silent, not speaking up. I got another no. That's nice. Some more no's. Thank you. One thing I also just want to encourage in general, I really like hearing from you all, not only in the chat. It's nice to read what you all have to say, but I like hearing your voices as well. So I encourage you all to just, since we have a small enough class anyway, currently there are 14 of us hanging out at this live session, I encourage you to unmute yourself if you ever have something you want to say, and just say it. Just unmute it, interrupt me, tell us your thoughts on anything. If you don't feel that, like you feel like it might be rude to just interrupt by unmuting yourself, you can always hit this raise hand button. There's that little raise hand button at the very bottom of the screen, that little raise hand icon. And that lets us know, that lets me know anyway, that you have something you're interested in saying. I'll call on you the way I would call on you if you raised your hand in class. And then you can unmute yourself and talk. All right. So I did mention that one thing I might want to do right now is go over an argument or two from that causal arguments participation activity from last week. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch our screen to that causal arguments activity. And let's see, I'm trying to think of which one we might want to go over. I forget which ones we actually went over last week. Why don't we do this one? Did we go over this one about me watching the 76ers play basketball games? I'm not sure that we did, so I hope we didn't. Oh, we did. Well, my memory's terrible. Thank you, Shanae. We did already go over that one. I guess I'm just attracted to that one for some weird reason. Oh, why don't we do number 2? Argument number 2 here, I'm pretty sure we didn't do this one, says playing sports has a negative effect on intelligence. Studies show that college athletes have a significantly lower graduation rate than non-athletes. So interesting causal argument. Let's first talk about the two things that are trying to be compared in this argument. What are the two variables that are correlated in this?
Sports and intelligence.
Thank you, Shanae. I also really appreciate you heeding my advice of just unmuting yourself and giving us the answer. Shantae also wrote in the chat, sports and intelligence, right? In particular, playing college sports, it looks like. Playing a sport in college. And in this particular case, the graduation rate. Or, interestingly, that's supposed to be some sort of proxy on intelligence. Interesting in that particular case. We can talk about that. And it looks like we've got, in this case, a negative correlation or an inverse correlation. The more somebody plays sports, the lower their graduation rate is. The lower the intelligence presumably is supposed to be. So, more sports is associated with, I suppose, is a way to say that, with lower graduation rate. And in this particular case, what are we saying is the cause, and what are we saying is the effect? Which of these two things listed is the cause? Which of these two things listed is the effect of that cause, according to this argument? Not that you have to agree with this argument, but what are we concluding is the cause, and what are we concluding is the effect? It's a little bit of a harder one to figure out. So Barbara's saying playing sports is the cause, according to this. That first sentence is our causal conclusion. Playing sports has a negative effect on intelligence. Playing sports is the cause. The effect is intelligence. Yeah, so playing sports causes students to graduate less often. All right, so now we're ready to do the evaluation of this argument. Everything in these first 3 columns were just set up to understand the argument. Feel like you're doing a good job understanding. What do you think about the truth of this? Is this premise, in fact, a real statistical correlation? Is it genuine? Or do you think this is more of a coincidence? This is not, in fact, legit. It's more of a spurious coincidental correlation. Shanae in the chat wrote spurious. What do the rest of y'all think? Are you with Shanae? or are you not? One of these things you might think about is, like in this particular case, we're checking the truth of our premise, right? Here's our premise. Study shows that college athletes have a significantly lower graduation rate than non-athletes. You're basically asking whether that claim is something you can trust and is true, or whether that claim is bullshit, is not true, is like a lie in some sort of way. And we've got two people like Isabel and Najwa saying they think it's genuine. Najwa saying it's true because it states studies show. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes people say studies show and they are lying, they're bullshitting, but you could also look it up to try to find out whether that's genuinely a statistic or not. There might, in fact, be some sort of statistics out there of college athletes and their graduation rate, and then the graduation rate of students in general who attend college. If you, in fact, look it up, you can find out that this one is genuine. This is a real stat that's out there. This is legit. And it seems like that matches with many of you saying in this circumstance. I think this one is legit, but you have to do some research to find that out. You don't want to just trust it because they've written studies show. That sort of studies show right there, I don't know, I feel like people use that all the time, even if they don't have studies to back up what they're saying. But this one happens to be true. Now let's check the support. Is there another way to explain this correlation? This might, in fact, be a genuine correlation. But do you think there could be another way to say, you know what, playing a sport doesn't cause the graduation rate to go down, but maybe we've got it reversed. Maybe we flipped the cause and the effect, or maybe we've got some sort of common cause going on here that explains why there's a correlation between both of these that might be different. What do you think? What might be going on in this circumstance? So, Najwa, you said nope. I'd like you to get a little bit more specific. What do you mean by nope in this circumstance? What are you telling us here?
Like, I don't know if it could be a common cause, because I feel like it's not a common cause. Like, I feel like it's true. Like, you put, like, athletes, they put sports above their, like, academic studies. So I'm like, it can't really necessarily be like a common cause. Like, sure, like, it could be if, like, say if, like, a quarterback of a football team would rather practice more than do academics, then he will probably want his teammates to follow behind him and try to, like, put his team so they could practice and win more games than his studies. But I feel like it's just genuine.
Interesting. So you would put good under support for this one. I think that's what you're saying. I just want to make sure I got you right. Okay. So you got one vote for good on this one. What are the rest of y'all think? Are you with Najwa? You're saying there's probably not some sort of common cause. It probably seems like, and the story you tell is very interesting. It's an interesting way of sort of thinking through this. Like what you're saying is like, here's the sort of narrative, the sort of account you could give to explain why playing sports might lead to a lower graduation rate. Playing sports might be the sort of thing that makes people focus more on one thing, playing sports, and less on the thing that helps you graduate, which would be like studying, going to class, finishing your schoolwork, all that sort of stuff, right? Exactly. And that's a plausible story. Yeah, awesome. That's a sort of plausible story. And Shantae agrees with Najwa, says, yeah, I put good too. Isabel says in the chat, I didn't think it was good, but I couldn't decide which one to put. Isabel, do you mind telling us what, like, even if you can't, like, circle one of the things, what do you think might not be so good about this? What might not be so great in this circumstance?
I didn't like that it said that playing sports has a negative effect on intelligence, because I don't think that like the act of playing sports would make you any less intelligent, but maybe because, I don't know, sports take a lot of time, graduation rates. But I didn't know if that was a common cause. I just couldn't decide which one to pick.
Yeah. So notice in this particular circumstance, you're bringing up a really good point that's not exactly addressed by this support concern we have over here. What we wrote over here is that graduation rate and intelligence are basically the same thing. And I think that's bullshit, right? I don't, even if you think playing sports causes a lower graduation rate, that's different from saying playing sports causes you to be dumber, right? The graduation rate and intelligence are two separate things. So we've got this sort of concern trying to like leap from what's actually said in our study, right? And what we're saying in the conclusion about intelligence specifically. And I think that's a really important difference. Shanae, your hand has been up. I want to call on you now.
Yeah, so I agree with Isabel. From my perspective, I do not play sports. However, a lot of coaches do bench their players, or they tell their players that they cannot play anymore if their grades are low. So I feel like if their grades have been lower, if they're failing, they cannot play. So that means it's like you cannot graduate with low grades if you play sports, regardless. So that's why it's hard for me to think that this is a good this is good, because it's like you can't graduate if you're failing and doing sports. So
Interesting. Yeah, I like this. The thing that's still interesting, and this is always going to be the case for all of these when we're talking about these generalizations, this correlation described over here is in fact a genuine statistical correlation. So this one counts as genuine, even if you're entirely right, Shanae, that there are lots and lots of counterexamples to this. There are lots and lots of student athletes who do succeed in their classes, who do wind up graduating ultimately, right? So I think that's an important point. That these causal generalizations, and remember they are generalizations, always have exceptions to them. In the same way that we were talking about generalizations earlier in the semester, I said as one conclusion to an inductive argument, the generalization, most dogs bark. And that generalization is true. Most dogs do, in fact, bark. But there are, in fact, some dogs that don't bark. Some of you might have met a dog or have had a dog that's not a barker, right? That isn't into barking. And there are some dogs that are even bred to not bark. I don't know if anyone has heard of Basenjis. I'll write that in the chat. Basenjis are a breed of dog that have been bred specifically to be voiceless, to be barkless. They don't bark. So in that particular circumstance, we've got something interesting going on. But if we can write out, going back to Isabel's comment before Shanae's, the one sort of concern here is that we are conflating two things. The premises are about graduation rate, and the conclusion is about intelligence. But importantly, the graduation rate and intelligence are not the same. Graduation rate does not equal intelligence. So that's a really important thing to put out there as a concern for this particular argument. That's a bad conflation to say that our evidence is supporting anything related to intelligence. I just don't think we have anything about that in particular. Now, I want to talk about another concern about this. So Isabel and Najwa also mentioned a few things in the chat. Let's get to that. Isabel says you need a minimum GPA even for NCAA eligibility requirements. And that is true, right? I think that's true for certain organizations, some even clubs, some sororities and fraternities, I think, have those sorts of minimum GPA requirements. And the same is true for NCAA athletic teams. Najwa says, but then I always feel like there are those cool coaches that make them slide or back their players up to the principal. So in that sort of case, what Najwa was saying is like, yeah, maybe they technically meet the GPA standards, but maybe they're not earning the standards in that sort of way. And as Isabel says, these standards are in fact low, but they exist. So I want to talk a little bit now about who gets to count as a college athlete and who gets to count as just a student at a particular college in general. So I want to focus right now on admissions. Let me do a little writing right now. Let's think about general admissions standards. Most colleges have a particular sort of admissions standard where they say like, usually to get accepted at this college, you might need like an SAT score that's at least this high. To get accepted to go to this college, you might need high school grades that are like this high, that sort of stuff, right? But there are sometimes exceptions. Some applicants into college have an exception to that particular standard. Does anyone know the sort of exceptions there are for who it is you might let in to college at a slightly lower standard? That maybe the SAT scores are a little bit lower than a typical student, or the high school GPA is a little bit lower than a typical student. Does anyone know who does get let in at slightly lower rates? So Shantae mentions the most relevant one, athletes. If there is, let's say, a lacrosse team at a particular college, that lacrosse team that recruits lacrosse players might want that lacrosse player to attend their college, even if that student wouldn't be accepted by the traditional admissions standards. So yeah. So Isabel says if you're in the top 10% of your class in Texas, you get automatic admission to any state school, like the University of Texas or any Texas state university. And they don't look at anything but class rank. So yeah, in that particular case, there's a clear admission standard, but there are exceptions on the lower end. So athletes get admitted at a slightly different standard rate. Typically, it's a lower standard. Some of you might have heard these scandals that have happened recently in the past few years of wealthy parents essentially trying to bribe or buy their kids into elite colleges by getting them on teams, by getting them on the lacrosse team or getting them on the rowing crew team or getting them on all those sorts of teams, because that's one of the lower standards that admissions might have. Other lower standards might also be if your parent went to the college, then you are what's called a legacy admission. Your standards as a child of a parent who went to that college might be a lower standard than another student whose parents did not go to that college. So that's one other sort of lowering of standards. So we have these kids of alumni and athletes are two of these. For sure, the most relevant one for us is athletes, right? The fact that we have athletes being admitted at a lower rate means that the sort of average of that sort of student entering in, the scholar athlete entering college, might have a lower chance of success just because of how they were admitted in this particular circumstance. And so that, in this particular case, that might be our common cause. We might have this admission standard being the common cause of leading to both getting into a sport at college and also getting a lower graduation rate as a result. So that's the sort of thing I was thinking of here. And that for me makes this argument bad. I think not only does the reason I was just suggesting make this argument a bad argument, but also it's bad for what Isabel was mentioning earlier, and Shanae was sort of reinforcing. The idea that we're conflating the graduation rate and intelligence is just a bad idea. I don't think somebody is more intelligent just because they graduated college. I don't think somebody is less intelligent just because they didn't attend college. That's a pretty bad variable, two variables to conflate. All right, so there's a really nice job sort of pulling this apart, getting through this. By the way, this I'm glad that Isabel mentioned there's a documentary on that. This is one of the bigger scandals that's popped up in recent times. The way in which privileged families try to basically game the admissions system at various colleges is through these sorts of exceptions that we're talking about here. Being the child of an alumni, being the child of a donor, being a scholar athlete, is the sort of things that could get you into a college that you might not otherwise get into by the traditional standards. Najwa, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Didn't that mother from Full House try to bribe her daughter into college?
Yep, she was one of the famous wealthy parents who tried to bribe her child into a college. Yeah. Yeah, and I forget if she's the one who's in jail right now. Good question,
They
Shay.
try to put her in for like a few months though.
Is that right? Yeah. So
Yes.
Isabel actually watched the documentary. Isabel, was the Full House actor on a part of the documentary or no? Yeah, she was one of them. I might watch it tonight if it's on Hulu. That might be my weird Friday night movie to watch with my wife. I'll have to check it out. Nice. All right, awesome. Nice job on this one. Now I'm going to go through a particularly tricky one. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to spot you this at the start. This argument feels like it's a really good argument. Studies show that people who practice mindfulness meditation report feeling calmer on average than people who never meditate. So meditation makes you calmer. Most of you are probably going to think, yeah, that sounds like a really good argument. I'm going to spot you this at the start now. I think this is a bad argument. I don't think this is a particularly strong causal argument. Right, Shanae? I really like that you wrote what in the chat, because this is a big what moment. And here's the important thing I want to say here. This conclusion, meditation makes you calmer, I think is probably a true conclusion. I think that conclusion is most likely true. But, and this is an important caveat here, that doesn't mean this argument for that conclusion is true. I don't think this particular study is good evidence for this likely true conclusion. So this evidence is probably not strong enough evidence to reach this conclusion. So this is what I want to talk about. So let's just do a quick understanding of this argument first to make sure we're on the same page. What are the two things we're correlating in this argument? What's our 1 and 2 over here? What are our two things we're correlating in our first sentence? Studies show that people who practice mindfulness meditation report feeling calmer on average than people who never meditate. Go ahead, Shantae.
Isabel already wrote it in chat, but I was gonna say meditation or mindfulness meditation and being calm.
Yeah. Excellent. Meditation, practicing meditation, and particularly that mindfulness meditation. We'll call that MM for short, mindfulness meditation, and feeling calmer in general. Awesome. And the way that they're correlated seems to be, this one's easy, a pretty positive correlation, right? In this particular case, what we're saying is that more mindfulness meditation leads to, is associated with feeling calmer. Mindful meditators feel calmer than non-mindful meditators. So what are we drawing as our conclusion in this case? What's causing what in this circumstance? I think it's pretty clear from this conclusion that's underlined. Meditation is the cause. Feeling calm is the effect. Meditation, I guess, MM causes. Exactly. Nice job in the chat. I didn't mean to write Felmer. I don't know why I wrote that, but Isabel and Facundo nailed it in this circumstance. Mindfulness meditation causes calmness, causes you to feel calm. I guess that's all right. You to feel. Awesome. And now I think this argument is in fact dealing with a genuine correlation. I think these studies are legit, but I think the problem's going on with support in this circumstance. I think this is where we might have a support problem. Thank you, Shanae, for saying this is genuine, because these studies do seem legit. The thing we have highlighted is a legitimate correlation. But why might this correlation not be strong evidence for this particular conclusion? Facundo, go ahead.
So the first thing that came to mind with regards to this, the conclusion at least, so meditation makes you calmer. It's kind of like thinking if you go to the gym, and a lot of people start off thinking like, oh, I do this, I'll be giant by tomorrow or next, and it takes a very long process. So I don't think that I do meditation, and I've been doing it right for probably the first 3 months, and then I started to understand how it works, and it's just like the stopping of the thought process. But I only figured that out after half of a year of doing it, and it's not that I've been meditating for 6 months, so I'm calmer. It's just something that you begin to build.
Really nicely put, Facundo. There's this idea that like when you see people meditating and you see them later and how calm they are, you might think that like, oh, meditation's sort of instantaneously working in this way to make people feel calm. In the same way where you see like really particularly physically fit people leaving a gym that maybe they've just worked out in, you might say like, well, geez, they must have just started working out and that made them super strong, super physically fit. And obviously, it's much more of a slow process where you take a lot of training. In the same way you might require years of physical training to become as physically fit as some people become, it might require years of mindfulness meditation to feel as calm as some people feel. So that's definitely one aspect to this. It's not the only aspect, but it's one sort of thing. So Shanae, your hand is up, so I'm gonna call on you now.
So here's the thing. When it says studies show that people who practice mindfulness meditation report feeling calmer, that's not saying if you do meditation one day, you're going to get calmer. No, it's saying that if you practice this, if you do this on a daily, you will then become calmer. And I feel like that's 100% true. Not because it says studies show, but it has shown that people that practice mindfulness meditation actually works. And it's not just on people, on dogs as well. Because I have a puppy, I play mindfulness meditation, and he gets excited, and then he slows down and he goes to sleep. Also,
Oh, wow.
when you go to a gym, you don't automatically have your mindset on, when I go to the gym, I'm going to have six packs when I leave. No, when you go to the gym continuously, you will then become the person that you want to become. Now, if you stop that, you won't see the growth. So I feel like this is a really good thing overall. It's either good or common cause. I don't think it's reversed, but I think this is a good study.
Awesome. So I really like your analysis. This is a wonderful back and forth between Facundo and Shanae, because if we want to be really careful about what this particular premise says, it is saying people who practice mindfulness. And that suggests, and the studies do sort of bear this out, the sort of individuals who might do mindfulness meditation more than just 1 or 2 times, more than just like, I tried it out for a month and then I stopped. The idea of what it means to practice mindfulness meditation is probably like the participants were like consistent mindful meditators. Somebody who said like, yeah, I meditate roughly 30 to 30 minutes to an hour each day. And I've been doing that since 2015, something like that, right? I've been doing it for 5 years, and I've been doing this nonstop, right? Something along the lines of that. That might be what qualifies as practice in this circumstance. And there might be studies that even suggest that sort of strong correlation. Even if, and this is where I'm going to push back with Shanae though, even if that's the case, I might still be reluctant to say that these studies and these studies alone provide strong evidence for this conclusion that meditation is definitely what's the cause and feeling calm is definitely the effect based off of these studies. So I'm going to go to what Shantae wrote in the chat right now. Shantae said that she said reversed in her answer over here. She went with reversed. And Shantae says, if you were calm, you might feel relaxed to meditate. So I want to think a little bit about this. I like this sort of idea right here. Who is the sort of person that might want to try meditation in the first place? Think about the sort of person who wants to give mindfulness meditation a try and compare it to some person who might never give mindfulness meditation a try. The sort of person who's willing to even devote a lot of time and effort to mindfulness meditation might be the sort of person who's calmer that in general than the sort of person who doesn't. Interestingly, Facundo says he doesn't meditate when he's calm. As Shantae says, though, spiritual people usually do meditation. The sort of concern here I have, though, doesn't even necessarily have to be borne out in your individual lives, because I know that there are definitely individual people who might start mindfulness meditation because they don't feel calm at all in their life, because they feel so stressed and anxious, because they feel some sort of other form of mental state aside from calm, and their goal is to feel more calm. There are definitely people like that, right? But the fact of the idea I'm thinking of here is that there might be some sort of self-selection going on where people who are in general more interested in a calm life, more interested in calmness, more interested in that like slowing things down part of life, might be a sort of different subset of the overall population than humans in general. Humans who never even think to try mindfulness meditation might not prioritize calmness, might not think that that matters for their life in the first place. And so mindfulness meditation is drawing calmer people on average. This is a general concern people have with, so this is what I write, because I've written this before apparently. The sort of people who are likely to try meditation, rather than say are, I'll weaken it to say may be calmer than average. This is a study design flaw that happens all the time, where the people you recruit into your study might already feel calmer before they ever even went to meditate than the average person who doesn't mindfully meditate. And so this is what we might have as a reversal going on here. We might, rather than saying doing mindfulness meditation causes you to feel calm, we might want to flip it and say the sort of people who already feel calm might be more likely to try mindfulness meditation. And again, I'm not disagreeing with this conclusion. I don't think this conclusion is implausible. I think that you would have to come up with a better study. And here's the sort of study we might want in this particular case. For our new and better study, what we would want to do is recruit people and ask them before they start mindfulness meditation, how calm do they feel? And then have them experience mindfulness meditation for several months. And then re-ask them the same questions after they've been mindfully meditating for a while and ask, how calm do you feel now? And study the average difference. If before the study, people on average were like this calm, like pretty high stress, and after the study, they reported feeling much, much calmer, that would be good evidence that it's the mindfulness meditation that's making the difference. That intervention is making the difference. So, so you take people who don't already mindfully meditate, and then ask them how calm they feel. This isn't going to fit on here. Let's see if I can push this in another location. Maybe down here. That's not great either. I feel like I'm just going to run out of room. Maybe not. Ask them how calm they feel. And then after you ask them how calm they feel, have them practice mindfulness meditation for a while, then re-ask how calm they feel now. That's a study that will get to the heart of this causal conclusion right here. This is a study that would work. And that's different from a study that's just asking to show the difference on average between the calmness of mindfulness meditators and the calmness of people who never meditate. This study is a better job. Do you see the difference? This is an important, weird, little subtle difference. This is, I think, the hardest one on here. This one's screaming at you to say this is a good argument. But in this particular case, that study design has a potential flaw in it. And so Shanae raises a really good question. Why do people offer meditation to those who are depressed? I think people offer meditation to those who are depressed because they think this conclusion is true, right? They believe this conclusion is true. And I want to point out, I still think this conclusion is true. I have not for a second doubted this conclusion. I just think this evidence of these particular studies aren't good enough evidence for this true conclusion. Criticizing an argument, I'm not saying the conclusion of that argument is false. I'm just saying the evidence in support of that conclusion is not good enough evidence. A better argument for that true conclusion would be this argument down here, not this evidence that was provided in the actual argument under number 3. And so Facundo says, mindfulness forces you to stop thinking by focusing on breathing. If you stop negative thoughts, you can prevent negative emotions. So that's a good discussion, like a nice explanation of what mindfulness meditation happens to be. Yeah. Questions, comments, thoughts, reactions to this one? This is sort of supposed to be one of the more mind-blowing. I really like when Shanae was like, what? When I first introduced the idea that this could be a bad argument. This is supposed to be like some next level critical thinking shit. This is getting us to really think about arguments at this sort of high level, advanced critical think stage. All right, well, if y'all don't have any more questions about this, what I'm going to do now is switch over to discuss arguments from authority, which is the big topic of the day. And I got a slideshow because that's how I roll. I'm loving slideshows every day, all the time. And this is roughly where we left off in class last week when we were introducing the idea of arguments from authority. We want to, whenever we're dealing with an argument from authority, where there's just a source saying something, like Amy Klobuchar saying something, and then the conclusion is just because she said it, it's probably true. Whatever that source said is probably true. We want to judge each and every one of these arguments based on the quality of the source, based on the trustworthiness of the source. And so the trustworthiness of the source amounts to 3 different possible factors. Whether that source is competent, the source is likely to know the answer. Whether the source is sincere, that is, whether that source has a motive to lie, or no motive to lie, or whether the source is unbiased. That is, whether that source potentially has possible allegiances, possible commitments that might distort their judgment, that might prevent them from accurately understanding the issue at hand. And we were mentioning this a little bit before. Sincerity and lack of bias are often hard to distinguish from the outside. You might not be sure whether a source is completely sincere or trying to lie to you, or absolutely committed and sincere, but just biased. And they're in some sense fooling themselves. So we want to be sure. It's hard to tell from the outside, but sometimes we can at least say, like, well, this source is in some sense either insincere or biased in that sort of way. So let's just remind ourselves of how this type of argument works. Here's an example of an argument by authority. Marine ecophysiologist Yvonne Lemejo claims that male king penguins store food in their digestive system for up to 3 weeks. Therefore, as a result, male king penguins probably do store food in their digestive system for up to 3 weeks. So everybody, rather than doing a poll nonstop, I want you all to just write in the chat whether you think this source is trusty or whether you think this source is shady. Feel free to just write in the chat, as Franco just did, T for trusty or S for shady. I love it. We got a ton of trusties in this circumstance. And I agree, right? This one seems particularly like a gold standard type of trustee argument, right? In this case, our source clearly seems competent, right? This person is identified as a marine ecophysiologist. That's exactly the sort of person whose professional job is to think about marine physiology, the bodies of marine animals, like a penguin is like an ocean-dwelling marine type of animal, and think about how that particular animal's environment influences them. Yvonne Lemejo is completely competent. Sincere is almost certainly yes. I don't know why Yvonne Lemejo would lie about this. It doesn't seem like there's a plausible reason for Yvonne Lemejo to lie in this circumstance. And then unbiased, I would think there's no real case for in this circumstance, at least barring any other sort of information about like weird controversies about this issue. I can't see how Yvonne Lemejo's commitment to anything might bias his judgment. So good, excellent. Now let's try this source. Bill Nye, the science guy, claims that male king penguins store food in their digestive system for up to 3 months. What do you think about this one? Do you think Bill Nye, the science guy, is trusty? Do you think he's shady? What do you think? Sure, many of you have watched Bill Nye, the science guy, on TV at some point in your life. I bet many of you watched his show. I bet many of you are singing his theme song in your head right now, or maybe just out loud. Feel free to unmute yourself and sing the song if you want to sing Bill Nye, the science guy. But also, do what Shantae's doing. Tell us whether you think this is trusty, or tell us whether you think this is shady. What do you think? We going trusty or shady, y'all? We got one from Shantae, one for shady so far. What the rest of y'all think? Trusty or shady, y'all? We got 2 for shady, 1 for trusty. Oh, the rest of y'all, a little hesitation, not as willing to jump in, not as sure. If you're not sure, by the way, you can also write like, you know what, I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure. I'm surprised nobody took me up on the offer to sing Bill Nye the Science Guy's theme song. Nobody wanted to unmute yourself and start singing? All right, so for those of you saying trusty, why? For those of you saying shady, why? Let's talk a little bit about this one. Why? Let's hear from Shantae, or Isabel, or Barbara, or anyone else who hasn't spoken up yet in the chat but wants to. Tell us why. So Isabel did a little research, or maybe just already knew this cool fact about Bill Nye. Bill Nye's scientific bona fides, his academic area, is getting a degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. As Isabel says, that's impressive, but it doesn't have that much to do with penguins. I would expect mechanical and aerospace engineers to know a lot about how planes work and maybe how rockets work and how to like build stuff that can go into the air. But he might not know nearly as much about all forms of science, even if his name is the science guy. But like one thing we could think of is that like his job for a while after he got his degree in mechanical and aerospace engineer was to go on TV and to talk about science, right? He had a science show that was devoted not just to engineering or aerospace, but to like all different forms of science, right? And so Shante says like maybe he's done research, right? So there is something possible about this, right? I feel like if he said this on his TV show, I'd be like, well, I don't know. He probably has a whole team of researchers behind him. He probably has done the research himself a little bit. Sure, he's not like a marine ecophysiologist, but there's something to this, right? So like in general, I would feel like he's competent. But here's the sort of other concern I want to point out here. As Franco says, it looks like Franco looked him up, maybe on Wikipedia. He's listed as an educator, a comedian, a TV host, an actor. Yeah, he's definitely gained most of his fame in the United States by being on television, particularly hosting science education shows. But one sort of concern we might have is that there is this interesting disagreement between the authority we were appealing to in the last argument, Yvonne Lamejo, and Bill Nye. So they're making similar claims about male king penguins. Yvonne Lamejo is saying that these king penguins store food in their digestive system for up to 3 weeks. And Bill Nye is saying it's up to 3 months. In this circumstance, who would you trust more? Who are you going to give your sort of credibility to more? Are you going to trust Lamejo or are you going to trust Bill Nye? So Shante, who's the other guy? Is the other guy Lamejo? Okay, yeah, so it sounds like you're saying Lamejo. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Shantae's going with Lamejo, and Shante says he's an expert in marine life particularly. Barbara, it looks like you're in the middle of writing something. You're saying because Yvonne Lamejo, what? What gives him more trustworthiness, more reliability in this circumstance? So it seems like we're all going with Lamejo in this one. I feel like the reason in this particular case is that we've got a little bit more competence going on here. As Barbara says, he's a marine ecophysiologist. And his competence comes in degrees, right? If I knew Bill Nye myself and had the pleasure of asking him questions about penguins, I might expect him to know more about penguins than the average human because he's devoted his life to science and he teaches all different types of science on television, right? And as Isabel says, his education is at least in the field, so generally relevant of science. But if I really wanted to know for sure the answer, I would want to go to an expert, somebody who's devoted their life, who's dedicated their time and efforts to studying that one issue. And Yvonne Lamejo is exactly that sort of expert right there. The main idea behind this is that competence does come in degrees, right? You can have somebody who's like sort of likely to know, somebody who's like probably likely to know, someone who's definitely likely to know. And that sort of scale can be hard to judge sometimes. All right, now let's go for each. I've got some like rapid fire ones to do. What do you think? Let's say your friend Sandy walks out of the bathroom while you two are hanging out together and says, hey, I just saw a spider in the bathroom sink. Are you going to trust your friend Sandy or are you going to find your friend Sandy shady? Is she trusty or is she shady? What do you think? Is Sandy trusty or shady, y'all? Isabel's going trusty? Got some more trustees. Amanda's going trusty as well. Aja was going shady, question mark? Franco's going trusty. We got 3 votes for trusty, 1 vote for shady so far. No actual poll. I'm just checking in the chat. Another vote for trusty. All right, cool. Rather than even adjudicate this one, I'm going to move on. Ooh, another vote for, wait, is Franco, you're doing both? Trusty and shady? So either way, you're going to be on the right side of history on this one? We just have to ignore the other one you gave? So how about this? Your friend Sandy tells you while visiting Los Angeles, she was on a trip, that she saw Ariana Grande, the pop star, walking down the street. Is this trusty? Is this shady? In this circumstance, same friend. Is Sandy trusty or shady in this circumstance? And one thing you could do is ask whether she's more trusty, equally trusty, or more shady. Compared to the spider thing. Is your faith in Sandy going up or down on this one? So we got a vote for shady so far from Franco. Another question mark shady. Franco says this one depends. Isabel's going shady. Franco's now removed the question mark from shady. He's downright stating shady. What about the rest of y'all? I want to hear from everybody. There's nothing at stake in this. It's just nice to hear y'all thoughts. And again, feel free to unmute yourself to sort of talk your way through this. Well, I like this, right? I've just made up a friend of yours named Sandy, right? And you don't know whether she's like a general liar or you don't know whether she's like generally a truth teller. So I like Barbara's giving us a little bit more reasoning behind what shady or trusty. Barbara says, she could have seen her, but usually when you see a celebrity, you take a picture, right? So maybe in this circumstance, you'd be like, hey, show me a picture. Otherwise, I'm not going to believe it, right? Did you snap a photo or did you not? And if you didn't snap a photo, you might go like shady. You might need that more visual evidence. So Isabel, going back to the spider thing, right? There's no reason to lie about a spider in a sink, right? So in terms of motive to lie, there doesn't seem to be a motive to lie. But this one, I think Isabel's referring to the Ariana Grande sighting. This one just seems too wild. Okay, so there's something interesting about this, right? Like, how weird would it be to see a spider in a sink? Isabel's saying, like, that doesn't seem that weird. That's not a thing that you would lie about, you would make up. But how likely is it you would see this one particular big celebrity in Los Angeles? And I know LA is where Hollywood is, and there are definitely lots of celebrities in Los Angeles. Like, I don't know. How often would you expect to see Ariana Grande walking down the street? Not like in a car, not like on a TV show on set somewhere, or like performing music or something. Shanae says it's going to be way less often, right? It's going to be only once in a blue moon that you would expect to see Ariana Grande doing this, right? So in this particular circumstance, like the fact that this is a little bit more unlikely might make you a little bit less trustworthy towards Sandy. In general, I would feel probably more trustworthy towards Sandy on this one. And I might feel not like super shady towards Sandy, but I might be like, oh, okay. I mean, I buy it, but like I might have a hint of skepticism about it this time, right? Another sort of circumstance you might think like Sandy's the sort of person who might like really be interested in seeing celebrities, and maybe she's on the lookout for celebrities, and maybe she thinks she saw somebody who kind of looks like Ariana Grande, and in her mind she conflated that to definitely Ariana Grande, right? Have you ever thought like you thought you saw somebody who could have been a celebrity, Be like, you know who you kind of look like? You kind of look like Jeff Bridges, something like that. Maybe that's what she was doing in LA. She was people watching, hoping she would spot a celebrity. And then she spotted somebody who looked vaguely like Ariana Grande and leapt to the conclusion that that was Ariana Grande. That's another sort of possibility in the sort of way that, like, that's probably not the case in the spider example, right? It's harder to misidentify a spider in a sink, but it's easier to misidentify Ariana Grande. And interesting, Shantae, that she went to LA expecting to see a whole bunch of celebrities and saw no one. So sad. I'm sorry. Yeah, I've never been to LA, but like I would feel robbed. I would feel totally, totally robbed if I didn't get to see a celebrity when I went there. All right, how about this one? Your friend Sandy tells you that she saw a ghost while sleeping at a creepy hotel on that same trip to Los Angeles. What do you think? Is Sandy trusty in this one or shady? What are you going with on this one? We got a couple nopes, some shadies. Franco's going trusty, but a bunch of other shadies coming in quick. Now let's do the next one. What do you think about this claim in comparison to all the ones that came before it? Is Sandy more trusty as a result of what you're hearing here? Is Sandy at the same level of equally trusty or shady, or is she more shady? Oh, Franco went with trusty just for fun. I see. Franco likes to buck the trends. I like it. Be our lone voice of dissent. But Shanae and Barbara are saying more shady. Yeah, and think about why. So why are you saying, like, this was like way, way quicker, right? For you all to just jump in and go like, nah, shady, shade, 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 shade. Y'all were pretty reluctant to be like, I don't know about this one, the Ariana Grande one. Y'all were mostly quick to go trusty on this one. Why were y'all so quick to go shady on this one? Shanae, go ahead.
It seems like she's just trying to find a way to make it seem like, oh, I'm having so much fun, or I see so many things in Los Angeles. Like, it seems like she's doing the most right now.
Okay, so in this circumstance, she's like, let's make this all about me. Let me sort of like make up stories. Now you might be thinking she's insincere. She might be lying to you. She might be like making up that she saw Ariana Grande, making up that she saw a ghost. Next thing she's going to tell you she saw Bigfoot, or that she like climbed to the top of the Golden Gate Bridge because she also went to San Francisco somehow on her trip to Los Angeles, right? She might just be this like tall tale type of person, perhaps. Yeah. Well, the other sort of thing I could think about with this one is that, like, how confident are you that ghosts even exist? And think about that in comparison to these other things. Y'all know spiders exist and spiders are everywhere, right? Spiders are super common. Nobody doubts the existence of spiders. Now, y'all know Ariana Grande exists, but there's only one of her. So she's a little bit rarer, right? So spotting Ariana Grande is less likely to happen than spotting a spider. Now, what about ghosts? Some of you might think they're ghosts, but you at very least know there's controversy about whether there really are ghosts, right? That's a huge controversial topic, right? And the fact that we're even debating whether there are ghosts or not is surely relevant as to whether you can trust one person telling you that they saw a ghost, particularly when you're looking at the state that Sandy was in while she's claiming she saw a ghost. She is sleeping at a hotel at the time she saw a ghost. You know what lots of people do when they're sleeping? They might be in dreams, right? As Shanae say, it's your subconscious, right? She might be like in one of those like half awake, half asleep moments where she like looks over and sees a shadow. And it's really just the like shadow of like the air conditioner. But that shadow looks like a ghost. And Sandy misinterprets it as a ghost. She's also at a creepy old hotel, a hotel she's describing as creepy and old. So she's already more primed to be thinking in terms of ghosts and to be like on the lookout for ghosts, seeing stuff that might actually exist. She's also sleeping in a bedroom that she has never slept in before. And there might be all these weird noises that she's not used to that are starting to scare her and prime her for ghosts. All these weird shadows that she's not used to that might scare her and prime her for ghosts. There are all sorts of possible reasons that there's a bias in this circumstance that might be distorting Sandy's judgment. The mere circumstance she finds herself in might be such that her judgment is not as reliable. So Franco says, as an example of maybe Franco is our version of our friend Sandy in this circumstance, Franco says, I used to see a ghost in his bedroom on campus. And then a lot of his friends saw it too. It was a soldier from the North and South War. Interesting. So these are the exact sort of claims I want us to think a little bit about now. This is what people refer to as anecdotal evidence. This is one type of argument from authority. Anecdotal evidence is the sort of evidence that people put forward based entirely on someone's personal experience. Somebody tells you a little story. Another word for story is anecdote about their life. And that's why it's called anecdotal evidence. Here's an anecdote. That's my evidence for this claim. So the woman in this particular cartoon is thinking in terms of anecdotal evidence. Nina is telling this woman that this anti-aging cream is effective. And that's her thinking, so I should trust Nina. Nina's trusty. I'm going to buy this as well, thinking it's also very effective. So there are all sorts of reasons to distrust anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence is not the best type of evidence. And honestly, it's not the best type of argument from authority. And I want us to think about this type of evidence right now. I want you to brainstorm. Shout it out, unmute yourself, post in the chat. What are some reasons to distrust anecdotal evidence? Why do you might say like, this is shady. You should be suspicious and skeptical. So Shanae says, just because it worked for someone else doesn't mean it will work with you. That's a really good point, right? There's a lot of variation between person to person's experience. One person's experience is just that one person's experience. And we might not be able to generalize from that one person's experience. So this is a really good point here. This is the second one I want to. We're actually, with anecdotal evidence, dealing with a bad inductive argument. Somebody is trying to say, this anti-aging cream is going to work for everybody. And their evidence is that it worked for me. That's a sample size of one. Your one person's experience. Nina is one person and just her single experience. That's a hard one to just fully generalize about. Going backwards, by the way, people often do really have bad memories. So just going back to this, how much can you trust Sandy's memory that it was really Ariana Grande? Especially if she didn't take a video or a picture of it. So she doesn't have any of that sort of stronger, confirming, solid, tangible evidence. How much can you trust Sandy's memory on this? As an eyewitness, not so much. Same with a ghost. That experience might all told have been 3 seconds long. How fully can you trust Sandy's memory in this ghost anecdote? So we'll talk a lot more about how bad people's memories are later in this semester, but spoiler alert, people's memories are real bad. That's one definite reason. And the inductive reason that Shanae is mentioning is also another good one. What are some other reasons you might distrust anecdotal evidence? Why might you not trust somebody talking about their own experience? Making some sort of claim saying like, no, this happened to me. This is something that I've experienced. Why might you not trust that? Why might you go skeptical, shady? I like Franco's claim that Nina's the boss behind the scenes on this. What do y'all think? Look, I'm just happy to go to the next slide, but I want to hear from y'all. So Shante says, I met the Dolan twins once at the mall, and I lost the pictures and no one believed me. So maybe Sandy's telling the truth. Yeah, I think this is actually a really important thing. This goes back to what we were discussing earlier in class with that causal argument, with the true conclusion about mindfulness meditation causing people to feel calmer, which is different from whether the argument for that was a good argument. Not all arguments with true conclusions are good arguments. And the same thing, Shantae, right? You might not have a good argument from authority for meeting the Dolan twins, unfortunately. You might not have strong enough evidence, which is really sad, even if the conclusion is true. And going back to this one, Sandy might really have seen Ariana Grande. Maybe that is the case. But there are at least a few small red flags worth raising in this particular anecdotal evidence. Go ahead, Shanae, unmute yourself.
I was also thinking, like, what if Sandy is that friend that always, like, sees, quote unquote, somebody or sees something that, like, what if she's just that friend and it's like, at this point, it's like, Sandy, like, did you really see them? Like, because you've been doing this, like, for a while now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that idea of crying wolf, right? The story of the boy who cried wolf is the story of this boy who's constantly saying there's a wolf when there's no wolf. And then the one time it's actually true, and he does say there's a wolf when there really is a wolf, nobody believes him because his track record has been so unreliable up till then. If your friend Sandy is like that, she's constantly saying, like, you know who I saw at Dunkin' Donuts the other day? I saw Brad Pitt at Dunkin' Donuts. Can you believe that? And you're like, come on, you didn't see Brad Pitt at a random Dunkin' Donuts in Clark, New Jersey or something. That's the sort of thing that you might be reasonable distrusting. The flip side of this, by the way, is that you might have some friend Sandys in your life who by and large are really honest and really reliable. You might have individual friends who are just trustier in general, more trustworthy than most other people. And I do have some friends like that. I have some friends who, if they told me they saw Ariana Grande in LA, I would trust them. I'd be like, yeah, that's probably true. This is somebody who doesn't BS. This is somebody who's not prone to making big, tall tales, right? So a lot of this is harder to analyze. We didn't come down one way or the other fully on this one. I would say for sure this argument is on the trusty side of things, and I would be way less comfortable putting trusty on this one. I would instantly be skeptical and shady. This Ariana Grande one is this weird middle one where it's like, is this trusty? Is this shady? I need to know more about who Sandy is to really make a verdict. So, cool. So, another way of thinking through this is that when somebody's sort of pontificating from their experience, they're saying, like, this thing happened to me this one time, now I'm going to generalize, it's going to work for everybody. They're just not competent sources on this. I doubt that Nina is an expert on anti-aging cream. Nina's probably either that salesperson, in which case she's got a motive to lie, or some random friend of that woman in that cartoon. And some random friend of yours is rarely an expert on, say, anti-aging cream. Maybe some of your friends are, but I know most of my friends aren't, even though they'd be happy to give me advice on anti-aging cream if I asked. So Franco writes in the chat, in this case, you're too lonely and too inferior to lie. I've seen them so that even if she hasn't seen her, she will say she has seen. Yeah, that's another interesting example of a type of friend you might know who has a little bit of that, like, inferiority complex, right, in that sort of circumstance. Nice. Here's another reason, like, a really good type of argument for, like, what's an effective anti-aging cream and what's not an effective anti-aging cream would be the sort of person who's, like, tried all the different types of anti-aging cream and has done some sort of, like, double-blind study, run it through some sort of experiment to test the efficacy of all the various anti-aging creams. Most of the time, though, people don't do that, right? Most of the time, people try 1 or 2 anti-aging creams, maybe just 1, and they haven't even tried any others. If they're going to offer if they're going to offer their advice, they have nothing to compare it to. And then we also got to deal with possible insincere people of the sort that Shanae was just mentioning, and Franco was also talking about in the chat. You got some people who just lie. You got some people who are just biased. If Nina is that woman working behind the counter, and that woman working behind the counter works at that particular store, Nina's going to say what she's going to say to get you to buy that stuff. She's going to be totally insincere, or at least there's the possibility of that insincerity in that circumstance. And by the way, one of the bigger issues is that, like, I think when we sit and think hard enough, when we reflect on it, we get that anecdotal evidence is bad, that it's not that trustworthy at all, that we should be particularly skeptical of anecdotal evidence. But the problem is, we have a strong social pressure to trust, because who are the sort of people who are telling you anecdotal evidence? Who are the sort of people who are coming to you talking about their personal experience as evidence for some particular claim? They're going to be your friends. They're going to be your family members. They're going to be people who are close to you, people you have a strong social bond with. Those are the exact sort of people you have like a familial obligation to trust out of just basic loyalty. Even if from the perspective of logic, where your concern is whether we've got rational evidence for the truth of a claim, is more skeptical. There's a difference between this moral concern for being loyal and this concern for actually getting a good understanding of the world. And I'm not saying loyalty is bad. I'm not saying having friends and family members that you put your faith and trust in is bad. But this is a potential bias that we're going to be studying later on in this class. We'll be discussing all of these cognitive biases that might inhibit or prevent our ability to reason as good as it could. All right, so let's talk about this as an example right now. Let's say you have a friend, Fiona, who tells you that Acer laptops are unreliable and they break it. You going to trust your friend Fiona in this circumstance? You're going to go trusty? Or are you going to go shady to Fiona in this circumstance? Is Fiona trusty or is Fiona shady based off of this argument? What do y'all think? Shantae says depends. Does she have experience with laptops? Good question. Yeah. It definitely depends on Fiona. Let's say Fiona's sort of a new friend and you don't have that much background info on Fiona. You don't know whether she's like somebody who works at the Genius Bar at Apple or is part of the Geek Squad at Best Buy or has a lot of background with laptops. You just don't know one way or the other. What would you think in this circumstance about Fiona? Is she trustworthy? You're going to go T for trusty? Or is she shady? You're going to go S for shady. Going to go trusty or shady on this one? What do y'all think? Shantae's weighed in. What about the rest of y'all? We got Najwa going trusty. We got to vote for shady. I don't even know who said it. Another vote for shady and another vote for trusty. Interestingly, in the chat, I can't even tell who our person who spoke up, because I believe that's the participant who's labeled caller number 3006, number 2. So I don't even know who that is.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's Samuel.
Cool.
I'm at work, so I'm just listening. And,
yeah, no worries.
well, yeah, shady.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
It's nice to know who's the speaker upper. That's cool.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we got some back and forth here. We got a bunch of y'all saying trusty and a bunch of y'all saying shady. We're sort of like, well, not a bunch. I guess it's like 50-50. 2 of you saying trusty, 2 of you going shady here. So let's think about this in terms of anecdotal evidence. as a piece of anecdotal evidence, I don't think this is that strong. If you don't have any more information about who Fiona is, Fiona's probably like all your other friends. Like, think about you. How much background do you have on laptops? How much knowledge do you have about laptops? If you're anything like me, it's like, I don't know, not that much. Like, I definitely have worked with some laptops in my life. I own a laptop. Like a couple years ago, I owned a different laptop that I wound up replacing because it got kind of bad. And then a handful of years before that, I had a laptop even before that. So I don't know, maybe I've had like 3, maybe 4 laptops in my life. But I don't have that much experience with that many laptops. And Fiona, if she's anything like me, is probably not an expert on laptop quality in this way. And she's probably basing it on a few cases, particularly when she's talking about Acer laptops. Like, how many Acer laptops do you think she's had? Oftentimes, if somebody has a bad experience one time with one type of laptop, they just swear off that brand entirely. They'll say, no, I can't buy any of those laptops. They're bad. Well, you had that one experience that one time. Let's go back to this. That's a bad inductive argument. I had one bad experience with one laptop once. Therefore, all Acer laptops are bad. One bad experience is not a strong enough case. That's a bad inductive argument. I think the same thing's going on here. Now let's think about what would count as decent argument from authority style evidence for the claim that Acer laptops are bad or some other laptop is good. What do y'all think about this? Consumer Reports, the magazine and website, claims that Samsung laptops are less likely to break than most other laptops. I don't know how many of you have heard of Consumer Reports before, but Consumer Reports is a type of website. Y'all think Consumer Reports is trusty, or do you think Consumer Reports is shady? Isabel's going with trusty on this one. Feel free to do some research on Consumer Reports if you want to. Look into them. Hell, I could pull up Consumer Reports if you want. Ooh, Franco's, I think, giving us his own anecdotal evidence. Interesting. Interesting. So let's see. Consumer Reports. Go to the website, consumerreports.org. About us. Consumer Reports is an independent, nonprofit member organization that works side by side with consumers for truth, transparency, and fairness in the marketplace. Founded in 1936, it was a big magazine for a long time. Now it's largely online. It's a trusted source because it uses rigorous independent testing of products and research to create a marketplace built on credible information, transparency, and fairness. Another thing we could do, rather than just going to the source itself, maybe we can go to the Wikipedia article on Consumer Reports to see how they're described. It's a nonprofit consumer organization dedicated to unbiased product testing, investigative journalists, consumer-oriented research, public education, and consumer advocacy. So if you don't have much background knowledge on Consumer Reports, this is a nice little quick summary of what they are and what they do. Going back to that Consumer Reports website at the top here, they'll just basically review products. So we might not be able to fully see them, but we've even got laptops right here. They might give you ratings on dozens of measures of various laptops. We're not going to be able to access it because you have to now pay to get access to their articles. But they'll review 74 different laptops across a variety of ratings, like how portable it is, how good its power is or battery, its screen size, all of these sorts of factors, among others. This, as an argument from authority goes, in terms of that standard, is a much more reliable, much more trusty way to go. These are the exact sort of organizations that are likely to know. They're likely to have that comparison. Going back to the problem with anecdotal evidence, most of the time the people you meet in your life, just your friends and family members, aren't relevant experts who have sampled all the different types of products out there on a particular type of good to know which one is the best, to know which one is more reliable than others. They lack that general comparison. Consumer Reports does that comparison. Look at that chart on the bottom right there. It does this comparison, in this case, about the estimated breakage rate by the end of the second year of ownership. It dealt with each one of these types of computers for more than 2 years and ran a multi-year study on Apple laptops, Samsung laptops, Acer laptops, HP laptops, etc., and checked the breakage rate after 2 years. Much more trusty in that circumstance. All right, let's talk about this argument. Your friend Cheryl tells you her mom swears she saw an alien spaceship when she was a kid. What do you think? Did Cheryl's mom actually see an alien spaceship? You trust this one? You want trusty or shady?
Shady.
Post in the chat. I got her to shady. Thank you, Samuel. Got some shadies in the chat. 3 shadies in a row in the chat. 4 shadies in a row. We got all kinds of shade being thrown here. All right, interesting. I agree. Now, I think this is totally shady. The main thing I want to introduce about this one is that this goes beyond anecdotal evidence because we're talking about Cheryl's mom, but we're not talking to Cheryl's mom directly, right? We're talking to Cheryl. And Cheryl's mom told Cheryl, who then told us. This is like anecdotal evidence twice removed. This is what's called hearsay. Hearsay is like double anecdotal evidence. You take evidence of a claim based entirely on someone else's personal experience, but told to you secondhand by someone else who heard it from the initial person who experienced it. So that little cartoon at the bottom there is like Lucy's sister Sarah told Lucy, and Lucy told me that, well, that's twice removed. That's what hearsay is. There are 2 layers between you, the person now giving the evidence, and the personal experience. All right, so the reasons to distrust hearsay are even more than what we were just talking about. You've got all the anecdotal evidence concerns. People have bad memories. People make bad inductive arguments. People aren't experts. Many people are insincere. And now we've got to ratchet up the concerns because now that we've got 2 people involved, we've got 2 possible bad memories. Not only do we have Sarah, we also have Lucy. Both of their bad memories might be come into play. Even if Lucy's memory is great, Sarah's memories might be terrible. Even if Cheryl's memory is great, Cheryl's mom's memory might be terrible. Or vice versa. And then we also have the double possibility of insincerity. Maybe the person you're directly talking to is fully sincere, but they've been duped by a liar. Maybe Cheryl is fully sincere, doesn't like to lie, but Cheryl's mom is a liar and is constantly tricking Cheryl. Maybe going back to this one, Lucy's sister Sarah is a completely honest person, but Lucy is a liar and is insincere. So she distorts this. Those are some problems in that circumstance. There are also problems that just have to do with what people refer to as whisper down the lane effects or telephone effects. I don't know how many of you have ever played this game before, where you're in a room full of people. Remember when you could be in a room full of people and you just like took a phrase and one person whispered it to another person, and then that second person whispered the same phrase to a third person, and the third person whispered to a fourth person, and so on and so on and so on down the line of all the people. The chance that that particular message got fully communicated accurately throughout all the people involved is highly unlikely. Messages get distorted. People mishear, misunderstand what's being said. People distort what's being said based off of biases and just the natural fallibility of humans. So that's another sort of concern with hearsay. And then here's one sort of dramatic way of thinking about hearsay. Why is it that there are so many people who are saying there are alien sightings out there? Well, even if there are only a small number of people out there claiming there are aliens, totally based off of misunderstandings. So there might be some people who imagine an alien encounter because they're crazy or they want to feel special. Maybe there are some people who are sincere, but they've misinterpreted some particular experience as an alien sighting when in fact it wasn't. Even if only a few of them tell others, and only a few of those people who tell others, that's where we get it to secondhand hearsay. The chance that there's going to be a lot of distortions, the chance that there's going to be details not fitting the narrative that are revised or forgotten in the retelling of that quote-unquote alien sighting means that there might be literally 100,000 quote-unquote alien sightings out there, even if there are no actual aliens, just based off of mistaken misinterpretations or downright lies at the start. There might be that many stories about aliens, 100,000. All right, so let's take a look at this one. Your friend Cheryl tells you her cousin Gina says the food at the restaurant Zahav is delicious. Zahav is a restaurant in Philadelphia, an Israeli Mediterranean style food restaurant. Really good hummus, for instance. What do you think about this? Your friend Cheryl tells you her cousin Gina says the food's delicious. Trusty or shady? What are y'all thinking? We got one vote for trusty from Shanae. We got one vote for shady. Franco's going shady. So we got one vote in either direction. Keep it coming. Talk to us why. Why trusty? Why shady, y'all? So Shanae say it's more of an opinion. Okay. And Barbara says it's shady because it's based off of opinion. Interesting. So Shanae originally said trusty. Are you changing Shanae to shady because of this opinion thing? Or are you saying it's trusty because it's an opinion thing? Oh, interesting. So now we've got two different reasons in the opposite direction. Barbara's going shady because it's opinion. Shanae's going trusty because it's an opinion. Interesting, y'all. And Najua's thrown in with the shady side as well. Before we even have concerns about the opinionated nature of this, notice that we're dealing with not only anecdotal evidence, but hearsay. You see who's telling you this? Not the person who actually ate the food at Zahav. Gina is the person who ate the food at Zahav. But are you talking to Gina in this circumstance? No. Who are you talking to? Cheryl. Cheryl, who heard it from Gina. So you're getting this information twice removed. So we have all the concerns we were just mentioning about the possible unreliability of hearsay. So that's a concern we have, whether or not we're even dealing with opinions from the start here, which of course we're dealing with opinions, right? This is clearly subjective because we're talking about how tasty food, how delicious food is. And as Barbara says, what I find delicious, someone else can find disgusting, right? And so in this particular circumstance, maybe Cheryl and you have the same type of food taste. You like the same sort of stuff. But you never met Gina. You don't know what her palate's like. You don't know whether you and Gina share the same type of food interests or not. And then I like Franco's counter anecdotal evidence. Actually, so Franco said that his friend told him Longhorn is good, that steakhouse. But when he took his birthday dinner at Longhorn, the food was so bad and the steak was so bad. So that was an example where you trusted in an anecdotal piece of evidence where maybe you shouldn't have, Franco. You had to find out for yourself, perhaps. So in this particular case, what if we make it not hearsay, but once removed? Now it's Cheryl telling you. Now it's at least a little bit closer, but again, going back to all the reasons to distrust anecdotal evidence, we have a possible bad inductive argument. Maybe she just lucked into a one good night at Zahav. Maybe your friend Cheryl isn't an expert on the quality of food, or more close to what matters, an expert on the sort of food you would like. In the same way that Franco's friend isn't an expert on the sort of food Franco's like, clearly, right? Notice what Najwa just said. Najwa said, this is why Yelp is your best friend. You know what Yelp is? Let's go back to this. Yelp is an argument from authority. Yelp tells us that there are more than 2,400 Yelp reviewers who claim that the food at Zahav is good. And this is old. Zahav has, I took this screenshot maybe back in 2018 or 2019, back when Zahav had 2,428 reviews. And they got 4.5 stars on Yelp, which is pretty damn high. So yeah, you do want to check the most recent reviews because sometimes the owners change, the chefs change, and all that. But that high a star rating with that many reviews is a far more trustworthy type of evidence. Go ahead, Shanae. I see your hand is up.
So that's basically contradicting what you just, like, not what you said, but what somebody said in the chat earlier. You cannot trust somebody with their opinion because you may not like what they like. You may not, it's different. So it's like, regardless if it's Yelp or another friend telling you, that you should try this food is very good. You can't really trust them because you may not like the way it tastes. So it's like, it's kind of hard. You can't really look at Yelp. You can't really, you have to go to the source yourself and taste it for yourself to understand if it's good or not.
Yep. I think you're exactly right if your goal is absolute certainty, right? If you want to know for sure whether you think the food at Zahav is good or you think the food at Zahav is delicious, you got to try it for yourself. That's the only way to know that. Absolutely. But here's my little pushback on this. These sorts of arguments, and I've not done a great job of this, these sorts of arguments are only trying to offer probable evidence for the conclusion. We're not saying the conclusion is definitely true. We're saying something like the conclusion's probably true. It has a high chance of being true. So I'm going to go all the way back to some of the very first arguments we were discussing last week. Oh, I think I cut them all out of here. Let me get to one of these. Darn it. Maybe it's on this worksheet. Yeah. Might be hard for you to see, but what's written on here is your 9-year-old sister tells you she didn't crack your phone screen. Your sister probably didn't crack your phone screen. Your 9-year-old sister tells you that today is Monday. Today probably is Monday. All of the conclusions of arguments from authority should have the word probably in them, just to be sure, because we're not going to say definitively that that conclusion is 100% for sure true. At best, we can say that this argument is the best, the strongest argument from authority we have. And even that isn't always going to work, right? But if you're going to trust any authority on what food might be good or might be bad, it's got to be one or two types of authorities. You either got to go with this popular appeal and say, well, geez, a lot of people like this place, so that's some evidence that I'll like this place. Maybe I won't, right? I don't always like the popular stuff, but at least that's some evidence in its favor. The other thing you can do is find a friend that really gets you and your food preferences, really understands you. I don't know if you have a person like that in your life. Does anyone know you that well? Does anybody just like know what you like and know what you don't like? For me, that might be my wife. She really knows the food I'm into and the food I'm not into. Maybe y'all got a bae that knows your food preferences, or you got maybe like a family member or a real close friend. But absent having that one person who knows you that well, this is probably the best we got, as Najwa was mentioning in the chat. All right, so we've been through a lot here. This is some nice conversation surrounding arguments from authority going on here. I now want to do a little switch over to discussing, wait for it, news sources. Where are we at? News sources. Here we go. I'm going to make it all big like so you can see it real big. All right, so I want you to tell me right now, just real quick and think about it. Let's say the New Yorker, it's a magazine, it's a website, reports that many women from Gaza who have cancer are no longer able to enter Israel for treatment. You trust in the New Yorker on this? You're going to go trusty or shady? What do you think? Right in the chat. Give me a T for trusty. Give me an S for shady. What do y'all think? You trust the New Yorker? You not trust the New Yorker? What do y'all think? You go trusty or shady? I'm a broken record. You see how much I'm saying this over and over again? We got one for shady. We got one for trusty. We got three for shady and one for trusty. All right. Interesting. So Sinead's like, sources? So in this case, the source is the New Yorker. By the way, we can click on this. I don't know. You're gonna now I'm gonna have to switch over. Let's see. Let me do a quick switchy switch. Where are we at here? This one. So I clicked on the link, and this is what it got us to. TheNewYorker.com. The news desk of The New Yorker looks like an article written by someone named Ruth Margolette in 2018. You scroll down, you can start reading this whole long article. That's your source. The source is The New Yorker. Y'all going trusty on this one now? Let me go back. I can do this. Let me switch back. Sorry for that screen. There we go. So today's asking, we got a peer review going on here? What's our sample? Yeah, so we got some concern here. We got lots of shady. We got lots of like, hey, let's back this up. How about this one? The website newspunch.com reports that Starbucks COO said white men are the root of all evil. And I'm not going to go to the website anymore, but you can see down at the bottom here, that is a screen grab of the website and the article from News Punch. What do you think? Trusty? Shady? Give me that T for trusty. Give me that S for shady. Got a couple shadies. Sinead says, I don't know, man. It has .com. New Yorker also had .com. Are we not trusting any .coms, y'all? We got a bunch of shadies. Isabel saying there's too much of a chance that was taken out of context. Interesting. How about this last one? Website called Snopes.com reports that the severed head of a rattlesnake bit a man in Texas. You trust in Snopes.com? Y'all heard of Snopes.com? We got a trustee. Y'all heard of any of these, by the way? You heard of the New Yorker? You heard of News Punch? You heard of Snopes? We got an S for shady, a trustee for trustee, another shady, some more shadies. She says, I feel like Texas has a lot of snakes. I like that. Isabel says it literally says rumor has it in the little, like, that is the logo of Snopes website. And the little, like, slogan underneath Snopes is rumor has it. So Isabel's going shady on this one. So I like this. This is just, I'm just priming you. I think for the most part, you have to do a lot more research to find out whether news sources are trusty or shady. And my guess is a good number of you haven't heard of Snopes.com. A good number of you haven't heard of newspunch.com. Probably a bunch of y'all haven't heard of the NewYorker.com or just NewYorker.com. So if you don't know, it might be hard to even render a verdict, trusty or shady. That's what I want to do today, try to think about how you could go about doing this. So first off, I want to just hear from y'all. Start listing or saying out loud some news outlets you generally trust. Just like, where might you go for news that you're like, I buy this. This news source makes sense. Today says none. Interesting. You don't trust any of the news. You got shade on all of it. Interesting. Except apparently that severed rattlesnake source. Naj is also ultimately skeptical. What about the rest of y'all? Is there any news organization you're like, you know what? I kind of like this source. I think it's generally reliable. I think it's generally trustworthy. Maybe it's just an individual. Maybe there's just one reporter, one journalist out there, or two journalists. Franco says all of them are entertainment. Sort of saddened because if all of them are entertainment, I think a lot of them are failing at their job. Because I find a lot of news organizations not particularly entertaining. Even though I agree in general with what you're saying, Franco, the sort of kernel of truth behind what you're saying is that, like, there is a lot of push towards entertainment within the journalistic fields these days, towards making articles and TV shows that are journalistic enterprises more entertaining, more about making people tune in because they're interested, not because they're presenting the news in a reliable, trusty way. Wow. I'm pretty shocked that literally none of you have listed any single source as a trusty source, though. There's a lot of shade being thrown towards the news right now among those of you who have spoken up. How about this? Give me some shady news sources. Let's flip it. Obviously, Shanae's going to say all of them, right? Maybe Najwa would say all of them are shady. But any of you got specific news sources you want to call out? So Barbara's going to call out Fox. And probably, I think you mean Fox News specific. That's the cable news channel that seems to focus on a conservative perspective. Although maybe you just mean Fox regular, the TV station that like does have news, but like is mostly just like TV shows and like reality shows and the like. Yeah, so Barbara's saying Fox News. Oh, CNN too. Isabel says that whole box on the screen. Everything from CNN to the Wall Street Journal to MSNBC to ABC News, CBS News, all of that. So Shanae's going to give a little pause. You do trust sports. So you would trust, say, Fox Sports. Would you trust CBS Sports? Shanae, go ahead, unmute yourself.
So it's like with sports, you kind of have to trust it because they show like the clips, they show evidence as to how this relates to that. Like, say for instance, somebody scores a goal, they'll show it like, oh, by the way, this person scores that goal. So it's like that can't personally be fake news. However, anything else that relates to like the world, politics, and all that, I believe that is fake news.
All right, interesting, cool. Yeah, and there is something like it feels like there's at least like less of a motive to be dishonest about like reporting the scores of a sporting event, right? And as Isabel says, sports, they're usually not claiming something, they're just highlighting stuff. Yeah. But there are like entire websites that are just devoted to reporting sports news, right? I don't know if anybody used to read Deadspin before Deadspin sort of collapsed. Now the people behind Deadspin run a website called The Defector. I don't know if anybody, trying to think of other places, just go to ESPN.com. Right? There are lots of just articles there, just like recapping, here's what happened in Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Here's who won the World Series Game 2 the other night. That sort of stuff. Franco says maybe RT is a good news source. I think by RT you mean Reuters. That's one of the ones listed on here. Are you referring to Reuters specifically, Franco? I'm going to give you a little bit of background about me. Oh, Russia Today. It's just not one of the ones listed here. Interesting. I'm going to give you just a little bit of background on me. I have a weird interest in this particular topic. And I'm fascinated by everything y'all are saying right now because I used to be a producer for an NPR show called On the Media. This was a show on National Public Radio. It still exists as a show on National Public Radio that was focused on news sources and offering media analysis and media criticism about what goes on in various news organizations. So I just have like this weird background knowledge, even beyond my my life as a philosophy professor. Before I even went into philosophy, I had this journalist career, working for National Public Radio, which is one type of news organization, a radio news organization, and particularly for a show on National Public Radio that focused on media analysis. So to just give you that background, whatever. I want to know how you could tell the difference between trusty and shady. By Shanae and maybe Isabel's standards, it's whether we're talking about sports versus anything else. But like, I think one of the bigger problems that that people in general is that it's difficult, really difficult to distinguish legitimately reliable, trustworthy news sources from shady news sources. And I remember somebody up in the chat, yeah, Shanae wrote, it's that fake news thing. Something has happened in the past maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years, depending on when you think fake news really started to become a thing, that has sort of eroded a lot of the credibility or the ability to distinguish credible from not so credible sources. So I want us to actually determine for each one of these organizations, News Punch, Snopes, and The New Yorker, whether they're trustworthy or whether they're shady. And I want us to actually do this right now. How could we go about actually checking each one of these news sources? Let's actually start with News Punch. What are you going to do? Let's actually do it right now to check whether News Punch is a trustworthy organization or shady. And just humor me for now, everybody in here who's saying they're all shady. Let's see if we can determine some differences among. Let's see if one might turn out to be more reliable than we initially thought, or one might turn out to be fully shady in a way that we should seriously doubt it. What would you do if you wanted to figure out whether News Punch is a trustworthy organization or News Punch is not so trusty? What would you do to check this? Tell me your instructions. What would you do? How would you check this news source? Right now, let's specifically focus on News Punch. So Isabel says start with Google. Barbara says research. Shante says check facts. So I like what Isabel's saying. Let's get specific here. Let's start with Google. Tell me what you would Google, Isabel. Because research and checking facts is really nice, but it's kind of vague in terms of advice goes. Because the natural follow-up question when you say research is like, well, how would you do the research? And with the natural follow-up for Shantae's check facts is like, well, where would you go to check facts? All right, so Isabel says, why don't we just do a little search for News Punch? All right, so let's do that. I'm going to go to Google right now. Where are we at? Yep, this is it. And I'm going to check this out. So let's see. News Punch. And my bar just is a Google search bar because it's Chrome. Here we go. What should we click on as our results? Top result is...
It says News Punch is a Los Angeles-based fake news website.
Okay. But so where's this from? This just popped up on the right-hand side. Like, what's the source of this? Is Google's not the source, right? I like it. You don't even have to click on anything. But like, what's the source of that? Who's writing that? It's not Google that's writing that. Nice. All right, cool. So Google will often give you these sorts of results when you Google something, right? But they'll also try to give you the source behind it as well. And it's usually at the bottom. So we see it right here. It's Wikipedia. Here we go, Wikipedia. And they literally just copied the first couple lines of this Wikipedia article. An LA-based fake news website known for spreading conspiracy theories, political misinformation, and hoaxes, mixed in with some real news stories. Originally named Your News Wire, it was founded by these two people. In November of 2018, it rebranded itself as News Punch and began redirecting that old traffic to News Punch. So Wikipedia is calling it fake news, literally using that word fake news. So what do y'all think? I mean, by that standard, we go to Wikipedia. Do you trust Wikipedia? Do you trust what Wikipedia is telling you in this circumstance? Is Wikipedia itself a trustworthy source? What do you say? Trusty or shady when it comes to Wikipedia? Shantae's saying no to Wikipedia. I like it. Isabel says, not really, like in general, you think Wikipedia is not trustworthy, but in this case, you do trust it. Interesting. Shanae says, they say don't trust Wikipedia, but other websites stated that it was fake. What do you mean other websites, Shanae? We only visited Wikipedia. What are these other websites you're referencing?
I was reading it, and all of when I saw most of the websites that was shown, it all said that it was fake as well.
What other websites? Like on the Google search?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. So let's go back. I'm going to constantly be toggling back and forth between here and there. So if we go back, not only is Wikipedia the first thing here, it calls it fake news. Something called sciencefeedback.co. It doesn't mention anything in this, at least, about fake news. Misinformation directory from factcheck.org. Apparently, it's on the list there. And News Punch's archives on FactCheck. Ad Fonts Media says News Punch is a news and entertainment website. It doesn't tell us exactly. Pointer.org. I don't know if any of you have heard of Pointer.org. Calls Your News Wire / News Punch one of the most infamous misinformers on the internet. Mashable.com lists Your News Wire, which again was the old name of News Punch, as a fake news website. Reuters.com is saying there's some sort of false claim in one of Punch's articles that eventually got deleted. So there's a lot of that. But so you see what complicated wrinkle we go in right now. Now we've got to wonder, how much do we trust factcheck.org? How much do we trust pointer.org? How many of y'all have even heard of either of these? How about mashable.com or reuters.com? You see how we're sort of in this now never-ending cycle. So what do? I'm kind of with what Isabel's saying here, that there might be a reason in this instance to trust Wikipedia. Why, Isabel, are you trusting Wikipedia in this circumstance? What makes Wikipedia trustworthy about this call out, calling News Punch fake news? Isabel said, does it matter how much we trust the individual ones, though? There's just so many that it makes more sense to just say, yeah, it's false. Yeah, so I buy that. There is something to that, right? We just saw in those first top 10 results, a bunch of people calling out News Punch. And by the way, this is the exact sort of thing that happens right now about Wikipedia. One of my favorite things about Wikipedia is that Wikipedia uses citations. Those annoying things that your other teachers demand that you do is list citations to back up your claims. So this little number 1 right here, that's a citation that's supposed to be backing up everything in this first sentence. So let's see if we can click on this. This now lists several more citations, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So it's not just one citation backing up this fake news claim. It's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different citations. Well, let's take a look at each of them. Something called the Sunday Times. We can even click on it if we want to check it out. The Sunday Times looks like it's the Times of London. Fine, I agree, Sunday Times. And at the top, it lists your Newswire, aka News Punch, as one of America's biggest fake news websites. So that's the Times of London. Going back, we now have CBS News. And we've got factcheck.org, again, another one we went with. BuzzFeed News. Pointer, again with Pointer all of a sudden. PolitiFact. PolitiFact again. Snopes.com. Hey, that's another one we're talking about later, Snopes. But each one of these seems to list as evidence to back up what Wikipedia is telling us, that particular claim. So this is a thing I really like about Wikipedia that I think makes Wikipedia a little bit more trustworthy than you might originally think. At least the way that like people are always, at least like people like me, like your professors, I feel like are always telling you that you shouldn't trust Wikipedia. And like you definitely don't use Wikipedia as a source in your papers and that sort of stuff, right? Well, I'm here to try to give you the reverse. I think Wikipedia is one of the best feats of human intellect in the last, say, 20 years. The fact that Wikipedia is less than 15 years old, and it has amassed so many different articles on so many different topics, and those articles are often annoyingly comprehensive. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever done this. Like, just go to the random article generator on Wikipedia. I just clicked on random article right here. And now I found an article that's kind of long about a woman named Deanna M. Mulligan, who's the president and CEO of the Guardian Life Insurance Company, which is a Fortune 300 company, a company I've never heard of, but now I can go to their link and find out what Guardian Life Insurance Company of America is all about. One of the largest mutual life insurance companies in the US. Look at how long their article is. It's a lot of information. Let's go to another random article. Herity, just a surname, fine. Supertank printers. What the hell are supertank printers? A type of continuous ink system inkjet. They differ from traditional inkjet printers. Look at all this information about this type of printer I've never heard of. Look at this information about Marnhull, a village in Dorset, Southern England. Look at all this info I've got. It's tons of amazing information, and just every article is teeming with these citations. Look at all the citations that are everywhere. There's a bunch of really interesting Wikipedia nerds who did their research to back this stuff up in these claims. And The nice part about Wikipedia is if you don't trust anything that's being put forward, you can always check it. You can be like, wait a minute. Did Marnhull really have 962 dwellings in 2011? Well, let's check it out. Let's check neighborhood statistics to back that up and see if that's correct or not. It's taking too long to get there, but you get the drift. The example I had in the slideshow, if I can go back to that. Where are you at, slideshow? There we go. Is the following sort of claim about from Wikipedia. If you go to Kean University's Wikipedia article, on the right-hand column, it states that Kean has about 16,000 students. Do you think that claim is trusty or is that claim shady? What do y'all think about this? In this context, is Wikipedia trusty or is Wikipedia shady? What do y'all think? You going trusty on this one? You going shady on this one? Isabel says trusty question mark. Barbara's going with a solid trusty. No punctuation needed. Let's do it. Let's go there. Let's go to Kean's website. We got Shantae with trusty, Ashley with trusty. Isabel's like, well, but I do know it's true. Yeah. So it is interesting, right? You can go down here, and here it is. It's actually been updated since I've taken that photo. I took that photo, I think, in the fall. 16,633. There it is. I'll make it bigger so you can see. It's the thing I've highlighted right here. And so Barbara says, we've discussed this already, and we have looked this up before. Well, I think the main thing I care about in all these circumstances is this right here. You got a citation, and you can click on that and see whether you buy this. This is coming from the state of New Jersey that's putting forward an institutional profile on Kean University. And somewhere in here, it lists the number of students served. It looks like it's page 5. We click it right there. We've got undergrads, 11,984. Graduate students, 1,242. And all told, where's my number as total? Right here. Because we also have professional practice students as well. All told, there's that number, 16,633. And this is coming from what seems like a pretty trusty site, New Jersey's particular specific governmental website, releasing some sort of PDF that's an institutional profile. And this is even providing even more sources if you want to go further. The institutional profile data from the New Jersey Higher Education IPEDS 12-month enrollment survey. So Wikipedia is often backing up its claims with those external links, with these citations. Citations are a wonderful aspect of Wikipedia. So I'm here to try to advocate on behalf of Wikipedia here. And I'm familiar with a lot of the complaints, right? People can just write whatever the hell they want on Wikipedia, right? Anytime you want to, you can just change stuff, right? And in fact, we can do that creepily. Let a little edit right now. I don't know if anyone has ever edited a Wikipedia site before. But let's do something like, I don't know, that lists the president as Lamont Repillette. Why don't we try to change the president? We could do that right now if we wanted to. Does anyone want to change who the president is? Or maybe if you don't want to change who the president is, maybe you want to we could change who the provost is. Who should we change the provost to? Isabel said me. I'm not going to take credit as provost. Barbara said Beyonce. Let's do it. Beyonce Knowles. PhD. Here we go. I'm going to publish these changes. Check it out. Scroll down a little bit. Check out our provost. Beyonce Knowles, PhD. Isabel's calling me out. You don't want to do this? Now, here's what I want to do as a little exercise. I want you to just check Wikipedia later today. I want you to check Wikipedia maybe tomorrow. I know tomorrow's the weekend, but take a look. Check Kane's article on Wikipedia. I want you to check Kane's Wikipedia article on Sunday or Monday. I want you to see how long this stays up on Kane's Wikipedia article. Right now, it's there. Beyonce is our provost. Going to hit a little refresh, see if it's still there. It's still there. I'll hit refresh again. It's still there. I'm curious how long it might take, if ever, for this to be changed. Because I know this, having done this a bunch before, that when vandals come in and mess with they're called Wikipedia vandals, when they come in and mess with articles, adding silly stuff like this here or there, it's remarkable how quickly somebody comes along and corrects that inaccurate information. In all the years that I've done this, teaching critical thinking classes, like each semester for the past, 13 years, the average amount of time it takes for one of these mistakes to be corrected is like 1 hour. Usually sometime within the hour, somebody comes along and corrects this vandalism that we put in there. So Najwa says, so what? There's like an alarm for each article if somebody messes with it? Yeah, there are weird people who either work at Wikipedia or volunteer who check recent edits of articles. It's some people's jobs to do this. So Franco's got it on his computer too. It's not just me. But if you go in particular, you'll often, oh look, it's already changed back, y'all. Did you see that? This was what, 5 minutes? And we can view the history here and sort of see what happened. Going back here. Oof. This person reverted edits. Somebody named Material Scientist. By the way, this was me. I did this at 15:45. And then literally 2 minutes later, somebody named Material Scientist came along. And this is a little background on who Material Scientist is. He looks like he does a lot of writing on chemistry stuff. A lot of stuff on the effect of psychoactive drugs on animals. Interesting. He or she, I don't know their gender. And then there's a little message that helps explain this. I don't know what this message is, but anyway. Oh, here it is. I undid one or more of your recent contributions. This is not me. What is happening here? This is awesome stuff. I had nothing to do with any of these things. I don't know what's going on here. But that's how this stuff gets changed back. So I don't know if that makes you want to trust Wikipedia more. That was a 2-minute turnaround where you got Dr. Tony back as the provost. So by the way, just to finish up our conversation about News Punch, going back to our slides, feels like if we're trusting Wikipedia in this circumstance, if we're trusting all those other sources where everybody's sort of converging around the same general idea, feels like it makes sense to go shady in this circumstance. So at this particular point, we're getting close enough to the end of class that I'm gonna call class now. But for you something, just as a little nice olive branch for ending class. This, I originally envisioned this final thing right here as an ungraded in-class activity. What I'm going to do is change this. So now this ungraded in-class activity is going to be an optional extra credit you can do this week. So we've already sort of done the check for News Punch, this middle one, but I want you to do a check on the New Yorker as your extra credit and check its competence, check the New Yorker's sincerity, check the possible bias or lack of bias of the New Yorker. And then I also want you to check Snopes. So in this is going to count as your extra credit for class this week. And beyond extra credit, there's also the homework. That's the other thing you have to do for class this week. We'll make both of them due on Wednesday. And that's all you have to do for the rest of this week. We are done for the day, y'all. Thank you for hanging out. I appreciate all of your input trying to think through this. We'll continue talking about all this stuff next week. Have a good one, y'all.